In May 2004, conservationists in South Shropshire decided to make a permanent archive of traditional building skills and their continued relevance today. What follows is how 4 of these ancient building processes are helping to preserve this unique heritage. The Romans brought brickmaking to Britain for use in some of their more important buildings. Examples of their square bricks and tiles have been found at Wroxeter near Shrewsbury and at other sites along the Welsh marches. Bricks were usually 8 inches square and 2 inches thick, and were often used in bonding courses on stone walls or to create arches and window openings. As in butter making, flat wooden tools were used to shape the clay. Bricks were then fired in simple kilns. But with the withdrawal of the Romans from Britain in the early 5th century, the manufacturing and use of bricks would disappear until well into the Middle Ages.
Well, when the Romans left these shores, they took with them their organisational and technical skills.
And weren't there any people left who could still make them?
Well, brickmaking was quite a sophisticated and collective industry, and you needed the volume of production to justify the investment required, together with the know-how to make the whole process worthwhile.
Nearly 1,000 years later, trade with the Low Countries brought bricks back to Britain as ship's ballast. Itinerant brickmakers travelled the country producing bricks from local clay. Some of their buildings, like this one at Bromfield near Ludlow, still stand. In the humble timber frame building, brick was used as an infill to replace the original wattle and daub. While in grander buildings, from the 16th century onwards, they were used to articulate the latest fashion in architectural style.
In order to span the window spaces, the Georgians created this system of what's known as rub brick arches. They soft-fired very fine clay to a point which was just enough to make them weatherproof, but soft enough to shape. They rubbed them against a whetstone to create the taper, and then over the space they were able to span and take the load in either side the window, and so create a stable structure. Well, if you really wanted to impress with your knowledge of the classical world, these Venetian windows really tested the bricklayer's art, as you can see by the arched rub bricks.
Northcote Brick in Gloucestershire, one of only a handful of firms still hand-making bricks, about 800,000 a year. Bricks are in their blood.
A good brick does for me when I'm out travelling in the car with a wife and I see a building, I have to stop the car and go and have a look at the brick, which she isn't very happy about, obviously.
She doesn't understand, does she?
No, she doesn't understand.
Clay is thrown into an open mould approximately 1/10 larger than the intended finished brick to allow for shrinkage. Excess clay is struck from the mould by a bow or scraper, and the brick turned out onto a pallet board. In permanent brickworks, they were left in open-sided drying sheds. In medieval Britain, bricks were fired in simple kilns or clamps. By the early 17th century, kilns and ovens became more sophisticated. Heat was gently built up over 3 or 4 days to reach a temperature of around 1,025 degrees centigrade. After 3 days' cooling, bricks were removed and sorted. In 1725, an Act of Parliament established their future size.
The size of brick was determined by the convenience by which a man could lay a brick. It was determined by what was easy to fire, and also a size which could emphasise the architectural detail of the classical designs which were in favour during that period.
By the mid-18th century, most parishes operated at least one kiln. Many early properties were rebuilt with a brick facade. Mass manufacture led to control of form and colour. The development of brick and tile machines meant greater uniformity of product. Steel and glass was also used to create some unconventional and evocative structures. Prior to the First World War, solid walls used lime mortar to level the bricks and keep them apart. From the 1920s, the common use of cavity wall construction has led to an almost universal adoption of stretcher bond for brick walling.
Unfortunately today, a lot of repointing is carried out unnecessarily. The joints which exist in a wall, flush with the brickwork, are perfectly fine for conducting moisture to the front of the wall. It's only when you have a joint which is eroded to 1 to 1.5 times its width do you need to repoint. If that is the case and comprehensive repointing is necessary, you remove to an equal depth all the mortar which exists in a length of wall. This is done very carefully with a plug-in chisel, taken out so as not to damage the arises of the brick. Once removed, the joints are carefully brushed, the wall is moistened but not saturated, and then when there's a balance in terms of the moisture in the brick and the mortar, so as not to suck all the moisture out of the mortar that's applied, can you then repoint. With the joints carefully cleaned, the mortar is rammed well into the joint with a pointing iron whose width is matched to the width of the mortar joint. This ensures that the mortar is compacted, and also it avoids any smearing of the mortar onto the face of the brick. We then wait a period which may be 4 or 5 hours until the mortar is firm enough to be struck. And traditionally the joints were struck in a top struck joint, as you see Trevor doing here, where the profile of the joint is almost like an arrowhead, and that creates a shadow line across the face of the brick, allowing the bricks to be distinct within a wall as opposed to reading the mortar.
And then there's the wrong way.
An angle grinder is a difficult machine to control, and if you run the grinder along the joints, you can see the top of the blade, you can see the underside of the brick above, but you can't see below. And what happens is that even in skilled hands, the angle grinder can vary along the bed joint and so take off the top of the brick below and destroy the whole rhythm of the brickwork, the alignment of the bricks, and widen the joint some 3 or 4 times its original width. Also, when you come to run the angle grinder down the perpendicular joints, it's very easy to nick the brick above and the brick below, and that again disrupts the precision of the brickwork. And when you come to repoint, particularly using a hard sand cement mortar, you then have to fill the joints, and so the mortar fills the void you've created with the angle grinder. The joints are variable in terms of width and profile, and the whole character of the wall and the building then changes. Well, lime mortar is an open, porous medium, and a sand cement is often hard and dense and doesn't allow the free movement of air and water vapour. So if a wall gets wet and the bricks get wet, with a lime mortar, the lime mortar acts like a sponge. It sucks the moisture out of the brick and then evaporates it to the face of the wall. With a sand cement mortar, the bricks stay damp and they can be subject to frost damage, and also with the moisture trying to find a way out, that can then go towards the internal face and lead to condensation and dampness internally.
Impervious paints and renders cause major salt and fungal damage to many buildings. Effective removal techniques include water or chemicals or light abrasion. High-impact abrasives or sandblasting remove the brick's fire skin, eroding the brick and damaging the building's appearance. The rationalisation of the brick industry has led to a reduction in the variety of brick generally available, sometimes resulting in some visual horrors. But happily, in recent years, greater awareness has led to more sympathetic designs using products which match the locality. In 1997, local conservation officers launched an initiative with Northcote Brick, resulting in the production of bricks from South Shropshire clay. And the handmade Marches brick is being used to dramatic effect. So what are they like to use?
Very good. Very good. They feel nice. They've got four edges. Colour goes all the way through if you need to cut them. You can cut them with a bolster or a saw. Yeah.
How would you describe them in your own words?
The Rolls Royce of bricks. The Rolls Royce of bricks.
And once you've used that,
You wouldn't get a better brick in that one. That is the best.
in Ludlow and surrounding areas, a bespoke building technique almost unchanged since Roman times.